कर देता हूँ, आप शुरू कर दो, ठीक है?
ओके सर। ऑलराइट, सो मैं कर दूं कैसे स्टार्ट?
हाँ करो।
Okay. So this is a revision session for the Indian classical literature paper. And in this session, we are going to talk about the prescribed sections from the Mahabharata. Obviously, the entire Mahabharata is not in your course. Only certain sections are. So we will be dealing with those. Discussion today will be largely thematic because obviously we can't go into a lot of details in an hour. So let's see. So starting, we can think about Mahabharata as a lot of things actually. I mean, obviously it is a literary text. As students of literature, we are looking at it as a literary text. It's an epic poem. But other than that, it is also mythology, it is also philosophy, it is also spirituality. It is also claimed to be itihas. Itihas would mean something like history. So you do also have a sense of, like, there is a history of civilization in Mahabharata. We can argue how accurate or inaccurate that is, but it is claimed to be also itihas, so to say. So I mentioned Mahabharata is an epic poem, so it would be helpful to take a look at what it could mean. What does an epic poem mean? So there are some definitions available, there are some characteristics available. We can look at those and we can then look at Mahabharata and we can probably, like put a check mark against it. Like how many of these characteristics can be found in Mahabharata as a text. So, to start with, we can say that epic poem is a long narrative poem which deals with characters that are larger than life. These characters are heroic. Some of them will be related to the divinity. Maybe there would be characters who are gods themselves. And these characters would indulge, in epic pursuits, right? So there would be, for instance, a description of great war. We would deal with, as I was talking about the histories earlier, we could have histories of civilization. So epics are written. I mean, there is a tradition in the West as well. Here as well, we have epics. In India, for instance, we can talk about Mahabharata, we can talk about Ramayana. There are other epics in the Western traditions as well. You would know there is something called Iliad. We have Odyssey. We have Aeneid. So Aeneid, for instance, talks about the history of the Romans, right? The Roman Empire and how it sort of came about. In Mahabharata, you can see there is a description of the northern India. The other thing about epics is that it's usually falls under the oral tradition, which is to say that it is not something that was penned down on day one, right? There is this sense of storytelling that's there in society, and it's passed down generations through the oral tradition, right? So there would be pre-existing stories, and one person would tell the story to the other, and then they will tell the story to the others, and then it will be.
हेलो।
हाँ जी सर।
मैडम, ना तो आपका फोटो शेयर हो रहा है, ना आपने पीपीटी शेयर कर रखी। कुछ तो शेयर करो, ये तो ऐसे क्लास नहीं होगी।
सर ये तो मेरे को नहीं बताया था इससे पहले।
वो आनंद सर का भी ऊपर से फोन आ रहा है कि ये तो कुछ भी नहीं शेयर कर रखा। आपने परसों मीटिंग में ज्वाइन करा था आपने?
नहीं सर, मुझे तो नहीं बताया ये वाला चीज किसी ने।
हाँ, तो आप अपने फोटो, तो आपकी फोटो भी नहीं आ रही बिल्कुल भी। फोटो तो आनी चाहिए आपकी, या पीपीटी शेयर करो।
सर पर मैंने तो पीपीटी नहीं बनाया, मैंने तो वैसे नोट्स बनाए जैसे मैं क्लास में पढ़ाती हूँ।
तो मैडम वो फोटो तो शेयर होगी, आपकी फोटो तो आ सकती है।
फोटो
भैया बाहर तो हमें नंबर ना दिखे जी।
सर मेरे को पता नहीं है ये टीम्स का कैसे इसमें लगाते हैं फोटो।
हाँ, मैडम आनंद सर से एक बार बात कर लो, एक बार आनंद सर से फोन कर लो।
सर आप मेरे को नंबर बताएंगे उनका? मुझे तो नहीं ये कौन सी मीटिंग हुई, मेरे को तो मीटिंग का भी नहीं पता।
हेलो मैडम। हेलो
हाँ हेलो सर। हाँ जी
मैडम, ये कैमरा ऑन होना चाहिए, बड़ी दिक्कत हो जाएगी, नहीं पीसीबी सेक्शन वाले आपकी क्लास काट देंगे। ठीक है, अब क्लास चालू कर दो आप। वो देख रहे हैं पीसीबी।
ये चलेगा सर?
हाँ वो आ गया, ठीक है,
ओके सर।
स्टार्ट कर दो।
मुझे यार एक सेकंड। All right. So we were talking about. So मेरे को स्टार्टिंग से स्टार्ट करना पड़ेगा। Okay. So we are looking at Mahabharat, and so far we have talked about that how Mahabharat is an epic poem, and it is an epic poem written in the Indian tradition. So, and we were just looking at what an epic poem is, and how there are epic poems in the Western tradition and how they are in the Indian tradition. For Western, we talked about we have Iliad, we have Aeneid, and the Indian tradition we have Ramayana and Mahabharata. I'm assuming most of you would be familiar with these epic poems. So, and I also talked about the oral tradition, that how it is not really penned down since day one. The writing down of the epic, this epic particularly, came much later. It was first passed down through generations in the form of recitations, public recitations, right? So, what does that mean is that there is many versions of Mahabharata available, right? So in some versions there would be more stories, some versions would have less stories, some of the stories will be told differently, maybe some there would be some additions, there would be some subtractions. So there are multiple versions of of any text basically that comes from the oral tradition, and so is true for the Mahabharata as well. The other thing we can talk about Mahabharata is that it is, I mean, obviously there is a description of the Great War, right? We know that there was this Great War between the Kauravas and the Pandavas. However, the war isn't really at the center. What's at the center and what we would want to look at in Mahabharata is the clash between the values really. So it's less of a clash between Kauravas and Pandavas and more of a clash between what Kauravas and Pandavas stood for, right? So you could say that maybe it is a fight between dharma and adharma, between good and evil, right? And we will look at these characters and how are they good or how are they bad, and what does that clash translates into. The other thing that's very that's important to note in Mahabharata is that it is a very optimistic text in that sense. I mean, obviously there is the war at the end, and there is this whole thing about the destruction of the world. But this destruction of the world is there because we have this sense that only once this destruction happens, then there would be a recreation at the end. There would, like, as in, we would move from bad to good eventually. So there's a strong sense of optimism there. Um, we have heroes in this epic, as we often do, and these heroes are agents of action here, right? So these characters are not passive, so to say. These characters are not subjected to their destiny or fate, so to say. They are very much active in defining what happens to them, and whatever happens in this epic happens because these characters are very active, and they are active in their choices, in their actions. So we could say that Mahabharata is less about courage or valor or physical prowess, but more about, as I was talking about, this fight between dharma and adharma. So Mahabharata is more about the spiritual strength, and the flexibility of the characters as to how they face the challenges that they get in life. So this is like a brief introduction to Mahabharata. Now we can look at specifics as to, like, we know we have the sequence of dicing in our syllabus. We have the dicing in our syllabus and sequel to dicing. We have temptation of Karna. We also have a section from the Krishna's peace proposal. So we can take a look at these very, very briefly. So for dicing, I'm assuming most of you would be aware of what the story largely is. But in very, very brief, I could tell you that so at this point in the story, Yudhishthir and the Pandavas have made it in life, right? Like, they have created this great empire for themselves called Indraprasth, and we have the Kauravas at the other end, who are very successful in their own right and everything. But Duryodhan feels jealous and threatened by the success of Yudhishthir, and along with Shakuni, Duryodhan, plots this plan to trick Yudhishthir and the Pandavas, and they plan to take whatever they have because they feel threatened, they feel jealous. So in order to do that, because we already know Shakuni cannot lose in the game of dice, so they make a plan that they will invite the Pandavas to their court, and they will have a game of dice, Chaucer, as we know it's called in Sanskrit and Hindi. And this game happens, and obviously they cannot lose. Duryodhan and Shakuni cannot lose. And what ends up happening in this game of dice is, first, Yudhishthir bets his property, right? So he will bet his chariots, his horses, elephants, and other property. Then, after losing that, he will bet his entire empire. He loses that as well. Then, one by one, he puts the brothers at stake, loses the brothers as well. Then he puts himself at stake and loses himself as well. And eventually, he also puts his wife Draupadi at stake, and we know that he loses the wife as well. And this is the basic story of the sequence of dicing, that Yudhishthir loses everything in this game, and what's of importance, why are we looking at this, is because of this. That once he loses everything, Duryodhan calls Draupadi to the court. And it's important because this space where this game is happening, the court, it's a masculine space. And but he calls Draupadi in that space. Draupadi does not belong to that space. So that is something to look at with criticality. Um, and they shame her, obviously. They pull her hair and they drag her to the court, insults her, and they say very nasty things to her. And but what's amazing here is Draupadi does not receive all of this passively, right? She questions them, and before questioning Duryodhan, actually, she questions her husband. Right? She questions Yudhishthir. Do you have the right? And it's very important, by the way, so pay attention to this. She asks, do you have the right to put me at stake? Because you have already lost yourself. You have made yourself slaves um, of the Kauravas. So do you have any right over me? So that's one. The second question she asks is, do you have any right over me at all, in the sense that I am your wife, but does that make me your property? That's another question she asks. Um, so this is the plot, so to say. But obviously, we are not interested in the plot. We want to look at all of this critically. We want to see, what does it mean? So I could tell you that when you're reading, and not just this particular sequence, but the other sequences as well, like you'll read the sequel and you'll read the Temptation of Karna, etc. I can tell you that the things that you want to pay your attention to is these few things. One is dharma. Dharma is a very important theme in Mahabharata, right? So that will be the underlying force of everything that's there. So you want to look at how dharma is played out, how different characters are assuming their dharma, how are their actions align with the idea of dharma, or how are their actions do not align with that. Right. So dharma is something that you want to look at. The other thing that you want to look at is the idea of fate, the idea of destiny, uh, and very related to this, the idea of karma, what you do, what your actions are, right? And the other thing, especially for this dicing sequence, the thing that you want to look at thematically is the idea of gender, right? And in the case of Karna, the temptation of Karna, the what you want to focus on is the idea of caste. Okay, so I've already told you about this. Now we can go back a little and think about whatever I've just said. So dharma. Dharma, if you look at the translation of this text, you would see that dharma is often translated as law, right? However, you will see that it is more than that. Just dharma in Mahabharata does not just mean law. It means a lot of things. It means duty. Um, it means justice. It means a sense of morality as well. It also means righteousness. So whatever is right, whatever your duty is, whatever the law suggests, whatever the just thing to do, all of that is dharma. So it's a very complicated idea, and it's really interesting if you look at it. So, for instance, you would want to look at um, the character of Yudhishthir. Actually, if you want to understand how dharma is played out, you want to look at the character of Yudhishthir. Um, so Yudhishthir himself is the son of Dharma in this epic. So he is very important in that sense. Um, okay, Uh, so in this epic, the characters are again and again they are put in situations where they do not know what is the right thing to do. So there is a lot of moral dilemma that the characters are faced with, and what we want to look at is that how these characters uh, choose to do the next thing. For instance, Yudhishthir, when he is invited for the game of dicing, uh, he knows that if he goes for this game, he will lose everything and something bad will happen. He knows it already. However, he cannot refuse to that game because in that moment he feels that it is his dharma because he's a Kshatriya and there has been an invitation from the king, from Dhritarashtra's court for this game. So it is his dharma to actually attend that cave of dice. He cannot refuse that. So he will go. Even though his judgment says that if he ends up in that place, something bad will happen. But he cannot refuse that. Similarly, when he is in the game of dicing, he knows that betting more and more things will only cause destruction. He will only be in the situation where he will lose everything. But it in that moment it will be his dharma to go on with that. He cannot just stop the game like that because his dharma won't allow it. Right? So these are the complications that will come again and again. People would know that this is a wrong thing to do. This might not lead to the things that they want in their life, but they will still do it because their dharma will tell them. So from this we know that dharma is something that is defined by your position in the society. Right. So for instance, we know Yudhishthir is a Kshatriya. So there are certain things that Kshatriyas are supposed to do. So that is their dharma. And if you are a good Kshatriya, you will not go against your dharma. For instance, if you're a woman, you are supposed to do certain things. You have a certain dharma. You have certain duties to follow. Even though you don't like them, but if you are a good woman, so to say, you will do whatever your dharma asks you to do. Right? This quote is something that should help you in understanding what is Mahabharata's take on dharma as well. It's yatho dharma tato jaya. It means wherever there is dharma, only there will be victory. So we know already that there is this war between Kauravas and Pandavas at the end of Mahabharata. We already know that Pandavas somehow represent dharma because Pandavas, largely speaking, will stick to their dharma. They won't do anything that doesn't align with their dharma. Dharma of being a Kshatriya, dharma of being a husband, etc., etc. So Pandavas in that way represent dharma, and Duryodhan and the Kauravas represent the opposite. So we know that because Pandavas are the people who are going to stick with their dharma, that is how we know that in the end the victory will be with them. Wherever there is dharma, there is victory. So if you follow your dharma, you will be victorious in life. That is the more or less the take the Mahabharata has on the issue of dharma. However, this is constantly challenged and complicated within the text itself as to what really is dharma. Like it's not plain and simple because sometimes these characters would find themselves in positions where uh, different part of their identities will ask them to do different things. For instance, if you want to look at the sequence of temptation of Karna, he finds himself in that exact position where his Kshatriya identity asked him to do something else. But then, because he's also a person who was raised by the Sutta people, by the charioteers, he is asked to do something else according to that dharma. Right? and there is more to it, then he has to make a choice in that situation. And that is how this is very complicated in that sense. So to explain that a bit further, what happens in the temptation of Karna basically is that we know that Karna is actually the son of Kunti and the sun god. So he is by birth a Kshatriya. However, he was abandoned by Kunti when he was a child, and he was then taken care of. He was taken by these a charioteer couple, and he was raised in their family. So he actually never knew that he was actually a Kshatriya. He was from the Sutta Varna, which is like a lower caste in that sense. Um, and then later on, when he grows up, he wants to be a warrior like Arjun is, for instance, right? He's very good at it, but his caste will not allow him. So Dronacharya, for instance, will not take him in as a student because he does not belong to the Kshatriya caste. He is from the Sutavarna, so he won't be allowed in that class. So he then has to pretend to be a Brahmin, and then he takes classes from Parshuram, and that's where he gets his skills from. Then, anyway, so just before this war is going to happen, Krishna and even Kunti approaches Karna and asks him to abandon Duryodhan's side, to abandon the Kauravas and fight this war from the side of the Pandavas. This is the temptation, so to say, and Krishna tells him that we all know that this war is going to be won by the Pandavas. So why are you fighting from the Kauravas side? You should come here and you will get the kingdom, and you are the elder child of Kunti, so you will become the king. And Krishna and even Kunti, tries to tempt him, tries to convince him to actually change sides just before the war is going to happen. But then you can see that Karna is subjected to these forces. So, as the as the son of Kunti, his dharma is to oblige her, right? And if Krishna is asking him to fight the war from the side of the Pandavas because he is their brother, so as a brother, as a Kshatriya, his dharma is to actually to oblige, to agree to this. However, he then presents this another argument, and he says that this is not it. I am also a friend of Duryodhan, and I have also promised Duryodhan something. Duryodhan has helped me a lot in my life when nobody else was there with me. Duryodhan was there and he granted me this kingdom. He gave me this name and he gave me everything. And he was my friend when nobody else was. And I have promised him that I will help him wherever he needs me. So as a friend, my dharma is to be with him. So you can see. So this is the same person, and his different identities in his life are asking him to do different things. Now, in that position, you can say that dharma maybe is not something that is plain and simple, right? Like it's not like you are supposed to do A or you're supposed to do B. It's much more complicated than that. And then you have to pick sides. You have to see which dharma is supposed to be overpowered in that situation. And what is the take of Mahabharata here? The take of Mahabharata on this situation is that whatever is right for the society is dharma, basically. Right. So whatever is good for society, that is the correct dharma in that situation. That's how you decide it. So this is something that we want to have a good look at whenever we are reading Mahabharata, any sequence from Mahabharata. We want to see how these characters understand their dharma, understand their duty, and if they follow it or not. If they choose to do something else, then what is the logic behind that? Another example of it could be in the Krishna's peace proposal. Krishna goes to Duryodhan right before the war and asks him to actually stop the war. he tells him that you are going to lose this war really badly and you will die in this war. There is no way you're winning. So you should not actually go ahead with it. You should stop the war. But then Duryodhan says that I am a Kshatriya as well, and it is my duty, it is my dharma to fight this war. That's what he says. However, we know, because we know the character of Duryodhan, because we have looked at him critically, so we know that that is actually not right. He is only saying that, but he's actually interested in getting the empire that Yudhishthir has, and all of that. There is this jealousy and greed and all of that behind that. But then he presents this thing in the name of dharma. So this is something that keeps on happening in the epic. That what is your dharma? Closely related to it is the idea of fate as well. This is also very, very important when you're looking at it. That everybody knows, for instance, in this story, that Pandavas are going to win eventually, right? Everybody knows. Dronacharya knows, Bhishma, Pandavas, the Kauravas themselves. They know that they're gonna die in this war, and who's gonna win. So the sense of this predetermination, preordination, destiny, so to say, it's very strong. We know that it has been pre-decided who's going to win this war. But what's of importance here is that this does not take precedence in that sense. What takes precedence is the human action, right? Even though everything is pre-decided, even though we know who is going to win the war, even though the characters themselves know who is going to win the war, but they do not give in to the fate alone. All the characters are very active in their choices and what they want to do, and that is what maybe even Mahabharata's take on it as well. That yes, of course, fate is there, but how is that fate made? That fate is made on the basis of your actions, right? So human action is of importance. You are supposed to look at your dharma and you are to act according to that, and that will eventually decide your fate, is what the idea is, right? So your fate in that sense becomes the consequences consequences of your actions. So we can say that yes, it was pre-decided that Kauravas will lose the war, right? But if you look at the story, if you read it, you will know that obviously that will happen because the actions of the Kauravas were like that. They were never with the dharma, right? They always did the bad thing with bad intentions. So their actions will only lead to destruction, right? Because they're always against dharma, so to say. So there is no way that in their fate there will be any sort of winning. This is also very, very interesting. So, especially with the character of Karna, right? So, it's interesting in the sense that Karna also knows that his team is going to lose, right? He knows that the Kauravas will lose, but he decides to stick with them, right? Even though he's tempted by Krishna, like with wealth and everything as well, with the winning itself, he's been tempted with that. But Karna does not do that. Karna sticks with the Kauravas, and you can see that maybe with that becomes the reason for why Karna comes out as a character that we still sympathize with. So Karna is not as much of a villain as Duryodhan is, for instance. Right? So Karna comes out as a tragic anti-hero in this epic because he sticks with the dharma even though he is actually fighting the war from the side that is associated with dharma. his personal actions are still are in some alignment with righteousness, so to say. So, which is why I think he comes out as a character that we sympathize with him still. So, yeah. So these ideas are very important for all of Mahabharata. Your karma will dictate your your destiny, your fate, and your karma are supposed to be in line with dharma. So both of these things have to go together if you want to win in life, so to say. So this, uh, the other thing that's very important, thematically speaking, is the idea of caste in this, right? Uh, you will see that the character, the Karna, which is why I called him an anti-hero as well, because he's a character who is very unfortunate, right? Uh, because of the caste system and other things as well. So even though he is born a Kshatriya, he never realizes his identity, right? Because he was abandoned by his mother when he was still a child, and this other couple raises him, and he's a very talented boy, right? Like ever since the childhood, he was interested in the art of warfare and was very good at it. He was probably better at it than Arjun was, and Dronacharya knew of it. Dronacharya knew that Karna had more skills than Arjun did, but Arjun was supposed to be this man who is to be known for centuries later for his skills in the war in the warfare. But Dronacharya does not admit Karna as a student. Why? Because he is not of the Kshatriya caste. So he's been discriminated against since childhood. He's been like there are so many instances in Mahabharata where we see that Karna is ridiculed for his identity as a Suta. Right, he does not get as much respect from anybody else, from anybody. Um, there is this episode where he wants to take part in the Swayamvar of Draupadi, but he isn't allowed there either. Why? Because of his caste. And all of this, uh, creates a resentment in him. He grows up to be a character who is bitter, right? Because even though he was very talented and he was, you know, there was absolutely no fault in his character, in his skills, but he never got the same opportunities. He never got the same respect in society, and he always had to deal with this ridiculing and with this discrimination. So he grows to be a bitter person, right? For instance, in the dicing scene as well, if you have read it, you would know that when Draupadi is dragged into the court, she cries and she is uh, obviously angry and all of that. And Karna, even though he is a man who we know is not a bad man at heart, like there are a lot of good qualities in him as a person as well. But even like in that scene, we see because he has been ridiculed, at Draupadi's Swayamvar, we see him as well making very nasty comments about Draupadi. So when the Shasan and Duryodhan are calling names to Draupadi, and they are trying to disrobe her and trying to, uh, disrobe her in the court and calling her names and all of that. Karna also doesn't come in support. Instead, he says that Draupadi is married to 5 men, so she is a whore herself, and it really doesn't matter if she is disrobed in the court or not. If she wears anything or if she comes naked in the court doesn't really matter because she's a whore. And this is something that you do not expect from a character like Karna because he's otherwise a man with virtues and all of that. But he says that, and you can see this as a direct result of his experience in the society, right? Because he has been ridiculed himself on the basis of of things which are of no matter, but he faced those situations. So he becomes that man who can say a thing like that. That's a very nasty thing to say, and that is a direct result of his experiences in the society, right? And so you can see that how caste, in that sense, uh, makes him what he is, and it's interesting to look at how it plays out. So you might want to, when you're reading the text, you might want to see that how he talks and all of that. The other theme that is very important in understanding Mahabharata is the idea of gender, right? So I give you a brief summary of what happens in the sequence of dicing. So that's amazing. So this is a very patriarchal society, right? So all women don't really have much to do, much to say in the society. We don't listen to women, right? Women are considered property of men. First, they are properties of the fathers, and once they're married off to men, then they become the property of husband. Now, this is an accepted thing in the society. This is a norm. But why are we discussing this here? Is because this is challenged, and this idea is challenged by the woman herself. So that is of extreme significance. In the sequence of dicing, we see that Yudhishthir puts Draupadi at stake, right? And so obviously you can imagine if you are playing if you are in the game of gambling, the only thing that you can actually put at stake is something that you own, right? If you are a master of something, only then you can put it at stake. So Yudhishthir uh, feels that Draupadi is because Draupadi is his wife, that means automatically that Draupadi is his property. So it is within his right to gamble her, and nobody questions it, right? Nobody questions it. It is a very acceptable thing for a man to put his wife at stake. But uh, it is challenged in the text, right? And it is challenged by Draupadi herself. She is brought to the court against her will. So even before coming to the court, actually, so Dushasan goes to her chamber where she is and asks her to come, and Draupadi refuses. She says, "This is my space, and you are invading it, and I am not going to go with you." And she refuses. So this refusal itself is a big thing, because you don't expect that from a woman character, in this society, but she does that. She refuses, and then obviously Dushasan applies force, and he drags her to the court, and she comes there eventually, and they ask her, they say very nasty things to her. They call her the slave of theirs, and they say, now you are going to be a dasi at this court, and we will make you clean the floors, and like you will be our property, and you will be used by all of the 100 brothers, and so to say. Like, it's a very nasty sequence, very very nasty things they say to her. And Draupadi challenges it, of course, and questions it, and she's very very angry in the sequence. And the first question that she asks is to Yudhishthir himself, and she asks, and it's a big controversy, by the way, because this is this idea that a woman is the man's property, is the husband's property, this is a very acceptable idea for these people. This is something that they do not actually stop and think about. It is an accepted notion that a wife is a property. But Draupadi asked it, and Draupadi says that if you have actually lost yourself also in this bet, then you are a slave to the Kauravas, right? And a slave cannot own anything. So, what right do you have to put me at stake? So, she refuses to be a property, right? So, this is a big statement coming from her, and she is challenging her husband, and she's challenging her husband in in a court which is filled with men. So first of all, her presence itself is very unnatural, so to say. She's not supposed to be in that court. First of all, secondly, she's not supposed to speak in that court, and thirdly, if at all she's speaking, she's definitely not supposed to challenge whatever these men have decided for her. So she's not a passive receptor of the tragedies, the atrocities. She is there to challenge and she's there to raise her voice. And she is a very intelligent woman, right? Very she has arguments to make, and these arguments she makes, nobody has the answers to. So this court is filled with very intelligent people, right? You have Dronacharya, Bhishma, Dhritarashtra, and everybody is there in this court, but nobody has any answers that can resolve this conundrum. Nobody knows really. If Yudhishthir is a slave to the Kauravas, does he have any right over Draupadi? Nobody knows. So she puts this very, very intelligent and very important questions to